Welcome to Kumba Software DPAA tutorials. This tutorial is about conducting Ping and TCP Connection Tests using the DPAA product. And before you walk away and close the browser and stop watching this video, you want to watch this because what we built into DPAA is very, very powerful by comparison to what you have on the appliance or with any other tool without writing a significant number of scripts to be able to accommodate all the various combinations that we have available for you. So you might find this video interesting. Be sure to set your video playback to high definition, and though some visual details may have changed in DPAA since this video was created, the functionality will be the same. So what I'm doing is I've got a couple of appliances selected, and I've selected the default domain just so we don't have some kind of disconnect in what I'm doing. It really does not matter at this point that I could be selecting any other domain here too. DPAA knows where IPs are located. So I'm under Find and IPs here, and I'm just going to search for all IPs on these two appliances. So I see I've got quite a number of appliances here, and I've got a couple of things in here that are, a couple of things in here that are really interesting looking and a lot of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to select a couple of IPs in this list, and I can do a control click, I can do shift clicks, I can, select any number of IPs that we find in here. And I can use the hamburger menu over on the right, and I can just do a ping test right away. I can just select ping, and what we're going to do is we're going to ping these two IPs I selected. So on this appliance, we're doing a ping to that IP. On this appliance, we're doing a ping to this IP. And you can see the results of that here. We can also use the right mouse click to pop up the same menu you get from the hamburger menu to conduct your ping test, or in this case, we're going to demonstrate the TCP connection test. This is a little bit different now. So when I click here, the TCP connection test needs a port, and what DPAA is doing here is providing you with some options that are available to you and being able to quickly conduct TCP connection tests with the IPs that have been selected. So again, this IP for this appliance and this IP for this appliance. So I can select standard ports, like I can select any one of these standard ports, or I can go and list a port. So I can type in a port like 9090. These happen to be and I can comma delimit these. And these happen to be the IPs that are the management addresses of these appliances I'm playing with. So those are interesting ports to work with. The third option is custom ports, where per IP address I selected, I can type in a port. So I'm going to do 22 and 23, let's say. Now, you need to understand that these are going to be unique ones, whereas when I do this and I say port 443, what DPAA is going to do is it's going to do a TCP connection test of this IP to that port and this IP to that port from their respective appliances. The same is true when I list ports. So again, this IP from this appliance to these two ports, and this IP from this appliance to these two ports. So we're building up cumulative lists of ports that we're going to be testing. But when I do custom ports, it's only going to test that port from with that IP from this appliance, and that port from this IP from this appliance. So I can uniquely identify ports. When I click finish, I'm going to be running now the TCP connection test for all those scenarios, a cumulative set of scenarios. So all of those ports that I had selected in the standard ports, all of the ports that I had selected in the custom ports are listed in the custom ports, and then again the list of ports, and then the custom ports I entered. So here what you can see is we tried port 443 from both of these. That failed, but the 9090 and 5550 worked. The 22 worked, but the 23 did not work. So you can see every combination of what we had put together was applied into a TCP connection test by DPAA just that quickly. So we got a lot of TCP connection tests done in aggregate right that moment. Now there's another place within the tool where we can conduct these tests, and it's also very powerful. So if I go to the Troubleshooting tab here at the top of the screen, the first tab under there is named TCP and Ping. So I have some options here where I can go in here and I can type in the IP like I had before. So I can type it in, and if this port's here, it depends on how I do it. And this is very similar to the DataPower screens, where in DataPower you have the screen where you've got the ping and you type in a host, and then you got the section where you got a hosted port to do a TCP connection test. We thought that was a little redundant and unnecessary because you may be doing both and you don't want to have to re-enter the host name. So here I'm going to ping this host. This works a little bit differently because in this case, it's using the selected appliances to make the ping test. So in this case, since I said ping this IP, it's pinging the IP address of from both selected appliances, which is a little bit different from the IP screen where I had an IP address already available to me. This is doing the ping test on both. Now the TCP test works the same. I don't have to re-enter the host. I can just TCP test. And again, what's happening is from both appliances to this IP to this port, I'm conducting TCP tests. So in other words, we're going to have a couple of TCP tests to that IP and to that designated port. Well, that's the easy part. Well, now we can get more sophisticated, right? So we can go down here and I can do the other one. I can comma delimit these here as far as I want. I can just do comma and do another one, another one, another one. And of course I can do another port. So I'm going to select 80 and see what kind of luck we get with that. Again, now if I do a ping or a TCP connection test, it's going to be from this appliance to both of these IPs in this port, and from this appliance to both of these IPs in this port. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the TCP test, and we're going to see what we get out of that. So now we're going to get 4 results because we're testing against 2 different IPs and ports from 2 different appliances as we go through here and conduct these TCP connection tests. So we're seeing that port 80 is failing for the 111, and it's conducting the test for the 112, and it has now failed for the 112. So we see the results of that in here. Now another thing we have the capability of doing is we can type the port in up here. So in other words, I can do a colon 443, and I can do over here a different port, say colon 22. And now I can do the TCP connection test. Now this is where it could be a little bit confusing for you. When you type the port up here, it ignores this port here. And the reason why I did different ports is so we can prove that. So I'm going to do the TCP test again. Again, we're going to get 4 results. So we're going to get a result for this appliance and both of these IPs and ports, and this appliance and both of these IPs and ports. So you can see where we failed to port 443 here, we succeeded to port 22 in both cases from both appliances. So you can see the appliance where the test was conducted, what it was connected to, and whether or not that connection succeeded or failed. And we also have the capability of doing something like this. We could type a host name in. So again, I can just do something like we'll do a TCP test to Google, see if we can get to port 80. We sure can. So we just tested this to Google at port 80 from both appliances. Likewise, you can type a port in here. So I can do google.com:443, and we can ignore the port 80, and we can see that the test was just conducted to Google at port 443. Now another thing that we can do is we can do CIDR notation. So I can do a slash, and you can do this with an IP address or a host, but if I do /30 like this, okay, what I'm going to be doing is I'll do a ping test right now, but I'm going to do a ping host, and what's going to happen is it's going to resolve all the IPs in this CIDR. So if I do the ping test with a CIDR notation, what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with more than one IP being tested from each appliance. Now be careful with this. If I were to enter a /8, I would be doing a lot of IP addresses here, but because I did a /30, I'm only going to be doing a couple of IPs here. Now this is a very interesting thing right here. I'm not sure where that IP, I guess that must be Google's IP. So we're pinging that IP address and the 2 IP addresses that come back from this. So those are the IP addresses I got back from Google, I guess, in the CIDR notation. I can also do a port here. So this is something that I don't think any tool on the planet supports, which is a combination of CIDR and port. So here what I've got is I've got google.com/30 port 443, and now I'm going to conduct a TCP test on that. And so what I've done is I've said, do I have an OK connection to 105 and 106 on port 443? And in this case, from both appliances, I have a valid connection there. So as you can see, you can test a lot of IPs. Now I could comma delimit these here, and I can mix and match. I can put IPs, I can put IPs with CIDR, IPs with CIDR and port. And it's also very cool that I can actually, it doesn't matter, if I happen to type :443, I can do a /30 and then do my TCP test again. And the DPAA is smart enough to figure out what exactly it is you wanted to do, and it conducts that test properly for you. So you have power here. That's what I was saying. You wanted to watch this video. You have power here you don't have anywhere else, and that's pretty cool. There's one more neat little trick that's up our sleeves here, though. You see this little empty box of load balancer groups? If I were to select a domain containing a load balancer groups, or a set of them, you see how it dynamically listed them? Let me switch to another one. I'll switch to another. You can see all the load balancer groups there. So if I switch to different domains, I get the load balancer groups. And of course, if I select more than one domain, I get an aggregate list of those load balancer groups. So as I select more than one domain, I get all the load balancer groups defined in those domains. So again, if I were to select any one of these or any number of these load balancer groups, and I conduct a TCP test or a ping now, what it's going to be doing is it's going to be going against the members of these load balancer groups so that you can verify that which IPs may or may not be working in that scenario. Now, I know we can do that with load balancer group status, but that's only as good as a health check is providing for us. We may not be successfully connecting with the health check, so we may want to just be able to come in and do a quick TCP test. Now, here is the rule. If the member is defined with a port, then it will use the port defined with the member in the configuration of the load balancer group. However, if the port is 0, which means the port is defined to be dynamic, it will use the port entered here. So I'm going to go back to 443 and I'm going to do a TCP connection test. And what we're going to see is probably a bunch of failures because I didn't validate these before I went. But basically what we're doing now is for each member defined in these load balancer groups, from each of these appliances, we're now conducting TCP connection tests on either their defined ports or this port if it's not defined. So you can see right now it's saying 389. That must be the port defined on this member, okay, of this load balance of this server defined in that load balancer group configuration. So see, we're seeing this port show up here, but in this case we may not be seeing any port. It looks like we're probably getting Google back. Oh, I know why, because we've got Google entered up here. If we don't have anything entered here, we won't get this out. The reason why this showed up is Google is not a member of a load balancer group, but Google is entered here. So everything you're doing in here is cumulative. So that's why we got another Google test at the end of this. So as you can see, the TCP connection test capability and ping capability in DPAA is very, very powerful. The fact that you can enter a CIDR notation and a port and comma delimit these things up here, which you can't do in the DataPower UI, it's just a pain. And you can test load balancer members beyond just what a health check might be doing. You're just doing a simple TCP connection test, which may be more primitive than the health check you have for load balancer groups. And you can do it from two different places, from here and within the IP screen by selecting IPs the DataPower appliance is identifying as configured somewhere within the appliance. So I hope this video was in fact helpful to you, and I'm sure it could have been interesting to you. You should have gotten something from it, especially if you consider what kind of script you would have to write to be able to support what we just demoed with a few clicks of the mouse. So go out to www.kumbasoft.com. There are many, many more tutorials out there on what you can do and how you can do it and all the other features that are available in the DPAA product. There's a contact us link there. You can go into there and you can enter your information to get a license or file a technical support claim. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.